Acoustic monitoring is a powerful tool when it comes to care homes providing better care. But to date, acoustic monitoring isn't as widely used as it might be. Ed Russell, the chief executive at WCS Care, was an early adopter of the technology and has worked closely with Jon White at Adaptive Care for many years to pioneer the use of acoustic monitoring in their homes. And some of the benefits that they have seen have been profound. For anyone leading residential care services, this is a hugely important conversation to listen to. My name's Simon Parker, and this is the Care Leaders Network podcast. Today, Ed, Jonathan, and I will discuss how acoustic monitoring is liberating social care. So, John, tell me, why is it so important that we talk about new and innovative technology that's transforming the care sector?
Well, I think lots of care providers that we meet and we talk to are at different stages of their own individual digital transformation journey. And it's really important that care providers are made aware of what tech is out there and how it can help. So there's some providers that we talk to where their journey, they're quite far along. The transformation is very mature. They've already brought on board different kinds of technology, which is going to really help them. And there's others which are at the other end of the spectrum, which it's something that they're just starting to think about. They're looking for advice, and then we see everything sort of in between. So a real big part of our job is to try and educate and advise, and just to sort of raise that awareness as to what is potentially possible. I mean, there's no one size fits all technology out there at the moment that I think will help everybody. So what we try and do is find out what particular pain points people might have, and really sort of try and drill down to see what technology is going to be the best benefit and create the most beneficial outcomes for them.
Sure. Yeah, no, that makes total sense. Ed, talk to me a little bit about your view on the same question again, because obviously WCS Care, prior to being chief exec, you were head of innovation, and I know that wasn't just kind of technology innovation, but I know that technology is something that you're super excited about as well.
I guess a very simple answer, thanks Simon, is to improve people's lives in living in care homes, to get a better sort of future for people. And to help improve the work for carers to be able to spend more quality time with residents. And there's no end of different technologies and ways of working that can really help that happen. And it's really great to see the sector beginning to embrace that and looking at how we can do things better.
It definitely is. And I think, like, one of the things that I think about, I'd be interested maybe to get your view on this, but I almost feel like if you imagine the adoption of technology, broadly speaking, into the care sector across the board, almost like on a bell curve, and it was broken up into quartiles, I feel like we're transitioning from the kind of almost early adopter market to the earlier stages of the early mid market. And what that looks like for me is that there's a massive uptick of technology adoption. So certainly that's my interpretation of the situation. I'd be interested to hear from both of you folks to see whether you agree with that.
I would agree 100%. I mean, we still do see, a great sort of a difference, as I say, it's just how mature people's digital journeys are so far. But because of the rise of things like the SCR, digital social care records, and other technologies that people are bringing on board, they've started to invest a lot more heavily in things like infrastructure and making sure that they've got things like the correct level of service into the building, the correct level of Wi-Fi. And there's been a lot of investment into that kind of improvements, which historically we wouldn't have seen. And getting those building blocks in place, either in new builds, so from when people first open the doors, or to be retrofitted into existing care homes, I think that's made a real difference and been able to make it a lot easier. And also people have never been more receptive, I think, to using technology.
I think that the pandemic certainly helped with the people being receptive, because I guess people just had to find ways of being more efficient, and digital is obviously a big part of that. Your point around the connectivity side of things, I think, is an important one as well, because if you haven't got the connectivity, everything's all connected these days. You need that strong either cable or Wi-Fi connection to make sure that things are working properly. So yeah, that's double underline that particular point as well. Ed, again, interested to hear your view. If we think about broadly the care sector as a whole, and then broadly technology adoption as a whole, do you think that my view around kind of where we are on that adoption curve, do you think that's realistic from what you're seeing from the market?
I'd say that the smartphone revolution has changed everything forever, because previously technology for care homes would have been a desktop computer of some sort, which your normal carers wouldn't be using every day in their jobs, and sitting at a static desk. So for carers to be able to use smartphones has changed everything, and the power that we can put into their hands. So I think it changes adoption. We talk about technology a lot, is how easy is it for carers to use, if that, or the end user to use. And certainly when we look at any new or innovative technology, that's the first thing we look at. And we'll often go with technology that may not be completely polished in the back end, but is really, really easy for care workers to use. And that's, for me, is the biggest point, and that helps adoption go through. And I think as providers are getting savvy to that, then we'll see a much wider adoption of that technology, because usually the decision makers aren't the carers at the front line. So it could be someone like me getting them to use some tech that no one understands how to use, and it's destined to fall over.
That's one thing that I've spoken about on both my podcast and other podcasts a lot. You almost have to, there has to be a cultural transformation before there can be a technology transformation or digital transformation. But there's a gray area in between those two worlds. To your point, if the tech's hard to implement, then that cultural transformation and the subsequent digital transformation is just going to be harder. So making sure that the technology is easy to interact with, easy to adopt, and easy to get the benefit from is just, wildly important. And you know what, I actually heard of somebody quite recently with a company that, to my knowledge, I thought was pretty easy to adopt, and the team have just hated it because it just hasn't worked for them. Now it might work for other organizations as well, but I guess, I'd be interested to hear maybe a broader data set, but conversation for another day. Anyway, obviously, Jon, your world is acoustic monitoring. Ed, I know that acoustic monitoring, we've chatted about different things like acoustic monitoring and more environmental type technologies like circadian lighting and all sorts of wonderful stuff like that. Interested to hear from both of you just broadly about the subject of acoustic monitoring and almost like where we're at the moment, because I feel like acoustic monitoring is something that is almost in a developmental phase where there's quite a lot of things on the horizon.
Yeah, so I'll pick this up to start with. So for anybody that doesn't know, acoustic monitoring, proven innovation, which has been originated in the Netherlands. Have been using it there for sort of circa 40 years. So sensors are mounted in a resident's bedroom to help with their care at predominantly nighttime. And when a concerning noise is heard, an alert is sent to staff to deal with accordingly. Now, the tagline of the CLB system is better nights, better days. And we say we give the gift of sleep. And the reason for that is that good sleep quality is so key because of the positive effect on physical and mental well-being that gives. And there's obviously lots of different benefits, operational benefits for staff, but it's these sort of well-being benefits for residents that really sort of stand out most for me, and the positive effect that it can have on the quality of people's life in general.
Yeah, I nicely laid out. I think that those two clear benefits around sleep quality, I think, are super important. Obviously, if you can make the lives of the care teams easier as well, obviously that's a double and very, very important win. One thing that I've been looking at, there's an awful lot of pioneering work happening in the world of aging broadly, and not kind of how aging is managed in later life, but how aging is managed in kind of earlier life. You've got people like Peter Attia and Brian Johnson who are doing some absolutely wild stuff in that respect. That I think probably some of the stuff isn't necessarily achievable for everyone, but there's some really interesting learnings from that. Stick both of those names into YouTube, you'll find some really interesting videos. But both of them espouse this message that, like, in the top 3 most important things that you can do from an aging and well-being perspective, get a good night's sleep. And if people's sleep is interrupted for any reason, then that can be of detriment, of course. And of course, people's sleep typically gets worse as they age as well. So anything that can contribute positively to that is that's got to be a big win for everyone involved.
100%. I mean, but my kids are a bit older now, so they sleep through. But I know from personal experience, how not being very well rested and having a bad night's sleep and can affect you. And with me being relatively young and healthy, I struggled still. So when you think, if you've got people at an advanced age living with dementia, for example, that really magnifies the detrimental effect on having poor quality of sleep can have. And one of the things which drives unfortunately poor sleep quality is the failure that you've got with more traditional methods of nurse call, which are reliant on interaction from the service user. So they need to have either the physical or the cognitive ability to pull the pull cord or press a button to let care staff know that they need assistance. And as I say, people with living with dementia, for example, they may not have the ability to do that. So they're more reliant on periodic check-in, and that could be 20, 40 minutes, an hour, 2 hours, whatever it is. And unintentionally, these visits can be disturbing and cause people to wake up. And what our system does is it allows people to sleep peacefully, replacing the in-room checks with continuous and intrusive monitoring using the acoustics. And from a staffing perspective, people don't need to go looking for these problems. They can concentrate on doing what they do best, which is delivering care.
Absolutely. And practically speaking, obviously I've highlighted the fact that technology adoption is largely dictated, the ease of the technology adoption is largely dictated by the preparation of the team to get ready for the technology adoption, and then of course the quality of the technology when it comes to its usability and its ease of kind of fulfilling its purpose, if you like. How easy is it to deploy an acoustic monitoring system in it? Because I guess there are different sets of circumstances, because you've got new builds, you've got retrofit. Give me kind of the different versions of that answer depending on the set of circumstances that you're seeing. So
originally, when we first started to install into the UK market, we had one model, which was the wired model, which meant that initially a lot of the success that we had was with new builds, because the system was reliant on structured cabling. So Cat 5, Cat 6 needed to be in place. And it was almost impossible to try and retrofit a solution like that, where you're going to have something that's going to cause such disturbance and mess and noise and extra sort of cost into an already operating care home. Now, what we've got is a wireless version of the system. So what that means is that if we are retrofitting into an operating care home, it's a lot easier. It's just plug and play. So we just need access to mains power and Wi-Fi. So mains power, just a typical plug. You usually find that as part of the general arrangement in a bedroom existing, so you don't really need to install anything. And as I mentioned earlier, because of the adoption of a lot of Wi-Fi based technologies, usually smartphone based, a lot of care providers have already invested in Wi-Fi solutions, which should be of the right level and also give the right coverage to be able to adopt things like acoustic. So it's never been easier for us. I think from a physical perspective of installation, it's like really easy for us to retrofit, and for new builds, we can install the cabling as and where it needs to go to. People still want to have that platform. But from a staff perspective, I think, Ed, if you maybe want to pick up what it's like, because it's a different way of working for a lot of seasoned staff, maybe.
Yes, John. We've had acoustics installed for 8 years now, and the very first home we put it in was a retrofit. And the very first call that came through for staff was a lady crying softly, and we had all the staff around the monitoring station because we were working with them to show what it was like, and they welled up with tears hearing that, and they went to the room, and 30 seconds later they were in the room, and they found the lady sobbing softly to herself, and she was opening her drawers, and she found a birthday card from her son, and she was wondering where her son was. So the carers quickly realised all that lady needed was a cuddle, a hug, and they were sold immediately, because they never would have heard that before. That never would have got to that lady. Even with a glass to the door, you'd have hardly heard that. So for all the other benefits that it does, which are many, that sold the staff straight away.
So just underline the importance of a hug as well. Let's not bypass that one. Obviously, the hug would have never would have happened in that set of circumstances without the technology. But clearly, that was an important part of the story as well. Am I, like, excuse me if if I've completely misunderstood this, but just to make sure that I'm absolutely clear and for avoidance of doubt. So am I right in saying, so previously retrofit, cables plumbed through properties, probably had quite a significant cost to the kind of retrofit process and all that type of stuff, but now it's literally plug it and play, make sure the connectivity is all basically set up, and you can integrate that into a care facility, like probably 10 times more easily and with less, in a kind of less invasive way. So it's just way more straightforward. Have I understood that completely correctly?
Yeah, 100%. That's exactly how it works for us. So previously we were reliant on either cabling being in place if we were retrofitting, so there would be had to be data there that we could repurpose maybe for something that's not used anymore, like a phone, for example, or we'd need to persuade them to let us come in and cable. And in a care environment, there's never any downtime. It's 24/7, 365. So it's very restrictive to be able to install anything that's reliant on cabled infrastructure. So the Wi-Fi, the wireless installs that we can do, it's really broken open that market for us, and it means that a lot more care providers can benefit from this solution that maybe wouldn't have been able to previously, just because it's so easy to install.
Sure. I don't know why, I guess maybe I hadn't thought about it in its entirety, and that totally makes sense, by the way. I guess I was just a bit of an avoidance of doubt, just making sure that I got that bit clear in my mind. But it makes total sense. I guess where we're at with technology, all of these things are pretty straightforward and pretty simple, which I guess in some ways I'm really glad that I have actually asked the question, because if I'm maybe not completely clear on it, there could well be other people out there that aren't completely clear. Maybe they've looked at pieces of technology in the past and they've seen the kind of some of the rigmarole, as you say, of trying to build in retrofit technology into a service that's as you say, it's a 24/7 service. Doing that can be pretty difficult. So I'd be interested to hear kind of what your more, obviously that was your kind of first touch point, if you like. That was the clincher that gave the care team the confidence to come back to almost like sign off it and say, yeah, this is a piece of technology that we'd love to move forward with. I'd be interested to hear a little bit more about that journey and kind of what's happened over those 8 years, because you're clearly an early adopter for this type of technology, and I guess you will have had lots of interesting experience having had that almost decade of oversight of the kit in action.
Thanks, Simon. Well, we retrofitted to basically try before we buy for a brand new care home that we were opening, and when we switched it on over that first year, straight away we found out that we got 16 residents who were awake at night, which we didn't know before. And that was in a 75-bedded care home over 3 floors into 6 houses. So the staff formed a wide awake club for those 16 residents, with the care plan objective of recognising a yawn and helping them back to bed, and trying to reset that sleep pattern that Jonathan was talking about earlier. And over the course of a year, we reset people's sleep patterns. So we only had 3 people who were awake at night after 12 months. And then during that first 12 months, there was a drop off in falls of 34%. Again, when we started, we didn't know that was going to happen. We didn't know how many people are awake at night, and that was normal for them. And we also reduced our staffing levels. So for 75 people, we had 6 staff on duty in the care home. And after the first year, we reduced to 5 staff. And that reduction in staffing paid for the technology in 15 months for the introduction, for a much better quality of service. And also it helped us look at rolling that out across the other sites.
That's brilliant. You told me about the Wide Awake Club before. I'm glad that we've captured that on the podcast. And I mean, a 34% decrease in falls. That's huge. Obviously, the implications of somebody falling over in a care service is really, really significant. And I know we've had conversations before about the long lie set of circumstances, which I'm aware of the fact that we need to continue that conversation, and that's probably a podcast within itself. But yeah, being able to have that kind of level of impact through the technology is just absolutely fantastic. And you've brought to life Jon's point around, you can do some really, really incredible things for people living in the care services. And if you can make the lives easier of the people delivering the care to the extent that you can reduce your overheads, that's clearly a really, really big win. So to round things off, I'm interested in kind of like to cast our minds kind of almost maybe into the future, or some of the exciting things that are coming. Am I right to think that video analytics is a thing, and that it's something that will be becoming maybe more prevalent when it comes to almost layering in extra insight into acoustic monitoring?
Yeah, so I'll pick this up in the first instance. So kind of bridging the gap between the two. At the moment, we use visual sensors, so IP cameras alongside acoustic monitoring. So they're more sort of traditional cameras. So we need to get some consent in place with residents. But what it means is that when an acoustic monitoring alert comes in, we can access live footage into a resident's room, and make a very quick and very accurate assessment as to what is going on and what sort of care decision needs to be made next. I'll just quickly add to that there's no recording with cameras currently, and there has to be a reason to look, i.e. an alert that comes in. But we've found that to be incredibly effective and very impactful on things like fall reduction in services that this has gone into. And I know that Ed has recently installed this kind of equipment. I don't know if you want to add anything about that, Ed.
Sure. Thank you, Jon. We have installed cameras in our care homes. I first saw them in the Netherlands about 9 years ago, and noticed it was residents wanting the cameras rather than us pushing cameras, so to speak, on them. They were residents there living with epilepsy, and they wanted a much earlier intervention from the carers, and they could get that. So I soon realised it was a pull from residents and from relatives rather than us pushing tech on them. So we set up demos, we set up information, and we were inundated with requests from people, like a plug and play mentality, or how you'd set your own privacy on your social media. People suddenly had choice about what they wanted. And we had very high rates of consent for people using cameras, ranging from 95 to 100% in the 4 care homes where we currently use them. And I mentioned falls earlier, so you don't always know what's going to happen when you do these things. So we reduced falls at night by 34% with acoustics, with no cameras. Comparing that across our 4 homes to homes that don't have acoustics, then when you take daytime falls into account, and there's a 56% reduction. Because as Jon was saying earlier, people sleep better, they eat, they take the medication, they're not got all the associated discomforts from lack of sleep. Now, when we put cameras in, we saw a further reduction from falls, but already at a low level. So we've got them in the first 2 care homes. We had a reduction of 45% more falls through the use of cameras. But half of that number wasn't falls. It was for people who had a witnessed event that would lower themselves to the floor, and it wasn't a fall. So we didn't have to contact emergency services and go through all the things that care operators have to do. So half of those weren't falls in the first place, but because they're unwitnessed, you have to take all the safety precautions. So, and I'm often asked, why do you reduce falls? And I think there's less people to fall because they're asleep, firstly. And secondly, we get there a lot quicker and we can intervene appropriately with residents. So I would say that the cameras, we have our own views on them and privacy, but customers have been really, really wanting them, and when they see the benefits that they get.
It's astonishing, isn't it? Because I think the broadly speaking, if you were to miscommunicate the use of cameras in care services, I would imagine that take-up rate would be low because people would just get worried about privacy. I think that the most important thing there, just to kind of double underline the point that you've highlighted, so much of that 95 to 100% adoption will have come through really, really careful, considered, empathetic, sympathetic communication. And I think that's a really, really, really important part of that. But I mean, the results speak for themselves. It is absolutely astonishing. So, Jon, Ed, thank you so much for your time today. It's been really good to speak to you and learn a little bit more about how acoustic monitoring and other technology is liberating today's care home sector.
Thank you, Simon.
Thanks, Simon.